Life is full of choices. These choices can define us. They can reflect who we are as human beings. We can ponder how others may judge us for these choices. That the choice must be made. I think I'll go with the black pair. Raycon's everyday earbuds are my go-to accessory for my weekly workout routine. It's honestly become something that I need at this point, with optimized gel tips for the perfect fit for my disgusting ears. These earbuds provide my wax-caked These earbuds provide my wax-caked ear canals with top-level comfort, so I can listen to my favorite tunes without feeling like there's a pine cone inside of my ear. I can also switch between 3 customizable sound profiles while I pump iron. In the spirit of Valentine's Day, Raycon will provide something that you're probably not used to. 8 hours of playtime and a 32-hour battery life. And to top it all off, you'll get an amazing pair of earbuds at half the price of other premium brands. So this Valentine's Day, get your loved ones the sound quality they deserve. Click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/522 and get 15% off your Raycon purchase, plus free shipping. And a big thank you to Raycon for sponsoring independent creators like myself.
What are you doing?
When I was in high school, I lived in a very small town in Texas. It was the kind of place where everyone was either related to each other or hated each other. I had no family there, so yeah. I did have a pretty blonde girlfriend, and was pretty hated for that too. Nothing major, just some petty harassment and occasional fighting. But at the time, things had been escalating. So that's why on Valentine's Day, my girlfriend and I decided to skip the school dance and just stay in and watch a movie at her house while her parents went out. It was just better to avoid any kind of trouble. We borrowed her dad's car, a little Honda hatchback, and went into town. We stopped at the video store, and afterwards we went to Dairy Queen and headed back to her house. Now, she lived in the boonies. It was out in the middle of the forest, along a lonely road, with no streetlights. We were chatting and eating our blizzards, when all of a sudden a car comes up behind us. No big deal. It became a big deal when the headlights flooded the interior of our car, and I saw a pair of hands on the back seat, and the top of someone's head peering up from the hatchback. The lights had illuminated somebody hiding in the back of our car. As soon as the lights hit, the head and hands retreated back down. A solid chill ran through the entire length of my body. I slowly reached down and pulled out my pocket knife. It was the only thing I had. My girlfriend saw me and asked what was wrong. I then responded, "Nothing. I just had to stop at my friend's house real quick." She knew that was bullshit. I didn't have any friends. I pulled over at the next house that came up and jumped out of the car, yelling at her to do the same. She jumped out in total confusion. I flipped the driver's seat forward and lunged into the back seat in full maniac mode. The intruder popped up like a jack-in-a-box with empty hands waving. Hey, relax. What are y'all up to tonight?" It was some weird kid from our high school who we had never spoken to before, ever. "What in the holy fuck are you doing in our car? I thought you guys were going to the dance." "I was just hitching a ride." We sat there staring at him with our mouths open, wondering what to do. He tried to act real cool, And obviously, we were in the middle of nowhere in some random person's driveway. We ended up driving him to the dance and dropping him off. The whole time he was telling us to come inside with him. Yeah, not happening. We dropped his ass off and sped out of there as fast as we could. When we got back to my girlfriend's house, she began crying and was shaking. She was completely freaked out. I still have no idea what he was planning on doing when the lights caught him crawling out of the hatchback. Yeah, I fucking hated high school.
I've had my fair share of weird, creepy encounters in my life, but this experience has truly left me frightened, and it still creeps me out when I say his name, John. For context, I'm a 20-year-old female, but this story takes place during my childhood. When I was a kid, my mom and stepfather owned a maintenance company. We lived in the middle of nowhere in the South. The town was very small and everyone knew everyone there. Because of this, there was always some sense of communal trust among the townsfolk. Every so often, my parents would get a job that was just too much for them to accomplish on their own. When that happened, they would hire local boys, usually from the high school or the nearby community college, to help out. Again, it was a very small town that still believed in Southern hospitality. So, it wasn't all that unusual for these boys to be invited over for dinner with my family. John was in his mid-20s and had only recently moved to our town from New York. He was a bit awkward, but he was a very hard worker, and at first came across as a very kind-hearted guy. I was 11 when John started working for my family. He would come and join us for meals after his shifts. My big sister, who was just a few years younger than John, had recently moved out west, and I missed her a lot. So when John began talking to me, I was very excited. It wasn't in a romantic way. I viewed it as having a big brother type figure who thinks my middle school drama was interesting to listen to over dinner. My family liked John and hired him for the next few jobs they got. John continued to be very friendly towards me, but all of us had always interpreted it as him just being nice. September rolls around. John had been employed by my family for a couple months now. My birthday was coming up, and my family promised to take me bowling, an hour's drive away. So it was a big deal for me. Somehow, John ended up inviting himself. I remember thinking it was weird, but John had always been nice to me, and I didn't want to be rude and say he couldn't come. My family was also heavily involved in the local fire department. Every year, we would volunteer to do this haunted hayride event, where people would dress up like monsters, go into the woods, and scare the guests that came through, with all the revenue going to the fire department. The event was scheduled to start 2 weeks after my birthday. My mom mentioned it to John, and he says he's really interested in it, and that maybe he could help out. My mom, bless her heart, is the sweetest Southern lady you have ever seen, and says, of course. Well, John was hired and ended up being put in the same area as my family, because he apparently didn't want to work with strangers. Being a tight-knit community, none of us were concerned that this grown man was going out of his way to be around me all the time. This is when things started to get weird. Mind you, this event required us to work long, late nights out in the woods. At the beginning of the season, there would sometimes be long gaps between groups. The first weekend, we had a gap like that. A boy I was friends with was working in the next station over, and I told my mom I was going to say hello to him real quick. I took the path through the woods so I wouldn't be seen in case a group of guests came through. As I'm walking, I hear footsteps behind me, and turn around. It was John. Hey, John. What are you doing here?
I saw you leaving. I just wanted to make sure you didn't get hurt out here.
Oh, I'm fine. My mom knows where I am.
I still don't feel comfortable with you walking around here alone. Come on.
John grabbed my arm, and I pulled away quickly. I'm just gonna go back to my station. For the rest of the night, John always managed to show up whenever I was alone to talk to me. I never mentioned this to my mom because I still felt like my discomfort towards John was rude. My family liked him, so surely I should too. Fast forward to February. John hasn't been around much because most of the jobs coming in didn't require him. On Valentine's Day, I get home and see a vase of red roses in the kitchen. I asked my mom if my stepdad had given them to her. She said no and handed me the card. It says something like, "You're the most beautiful girl I have ever seen." My mom asked me if any of the boys at school would send me something like that. I told her no. The next week, John swings by, not all that unusual. While he was there, he asked me,
So, did you like the flowers?
I play dumb. What flowers? He seemed upset at my answer. Later on, I told my mom and she calls him up. John, what the fuck were you thinking sending my daughter those flowers?
It was just a friendly gesture. I just thought a pretty girl deserved to have roses on Valentine's Day.
Don't you ever pull some shit like that again, John. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Come April, mysterious bouquets of flowers were delivered weekly, almost daily. My mother knew it must have been John. She calls him again and tells him to cut it out and that he's not welcomed at our home anymore. Not long after that, I was downstairs messing around on the family computer in the living room when I heard a tap on the window beside me. I looked out and there was John, standing on our porch with a creepy smile plastered on his face. I admit I was not as alarmed as I should have been. I guess I was still too young to understand the horrifying implications of John's behavior. I got up, poked my head out the door, and told him, "Hey, my mom doesn't want you coming here anymore."
I just want to talk.
Being a dumb 12-year-old, I joined him on the porch.
You are the most beautiful woman in the world, and I love you. I know you're still young right now, so I'll wait for a few years. I immediately got up and went back into the house to get my mom. I'm crying and shaking at this point. My parents go downstairs and confront him. "John, get the fuck off our property now, or we'll shoot your ass." You're just trying to deny us our love.
What the fuck? John eventually leaves, but gives them some parting words.
You can't keep her away from me forever. We will be together, no matter what.
We called the cops right away and got a restraining order. Remember the whole small town part I mentioned earlier? Well, it turns out small towns don't take kindly to grown-ass men who harass underage girls. John essentially gets driven out and goes back to New York City. I think that's finally the end of it. Then the phone calls start. He would call me from burner phones, so the numbers were never the same. My mom forbade me from answering the phone unless I knew who it was. Before, I would always answer unknown numbers when I was home, because our home phone was also the company number. My mom didn't tell me until much later that the calls we were getting became more violent and sexual in nature. They would always call the cops, but very little was ever done. Then things suddenly stopped, and it seemed like everything was over. When I started high school, I soon forgot all about John. Boys my own age began to like me, and everything seemed to be normal until the end of my senior year. A letter came addressed to me.
You're old enough now. I've been waiting just like I said I would. Soon, I'll be back, and we can be together, just like we planned.
The cops were called again, and my school was informed. I only had a month left until graduation, and in that time my teachers watched me like hawks. My mom insisted on coming to pick me up daily, and I wasn't allowed to leave with anyone else. I felt alone and isolated from my friends. We got a call from the police a few weeks later telling us that the NYPD had arrested John on unrelated charges, but they couldn't disclose more than that. I foolishly thought it would be the end of it. After graduation, I moved a few hours away and landed a pretty sweet acting job. That October, 2 things happened in 1 week. Another letter arrived at my mom's house, just as threatening as the first. I won't even repeat what it said here. That same week, I received a note in my dressing room at my job. Confused, I opened it up. It was an invitation to meet up with an old friend. I still have no clue if that was related to John, but something tells me it's too strange to be a coincidence. I haven't heard from John since. I moved again since that last letter. As traumatic as all of this was for me, I sincerely hope he has never put any other young girls through this kind of torment. I live in a small town in the Midwest. It's relatively safe. The crime rate is pretty low, mostly consisting of domestic disputes and traffic violations. There is only about 20,000 people in the town, and it seems like I see someone I know or at least recognize out in public every single day. Back in 2008, I was about to turn 19, and I wanted to have a real party for my birthday. I graduated from a private Christian high school, and I had never partied before, even during my first year at a state university. I just wasn't ever interested because my friends weren't either. I was just a small town girl at a big university who didn't really get noticed, other than the guys that shared my boyfriend's dorm floor, asking me what I was doing with him. They were hitting on me, but at the time I was in love with my boyfriend. That year, I decided it was going to be different. I had dropped out of college and had broken up with my boyfriend. I had a few new friends who were the party type, and they seemed to always be talking about how much fun it was to go to the house parties. I wanted my 19th birthday to be the first time I ever got drunk, so my older friends helped me buy alcohol and invited all of our close friends over to my house. The night came and went. Fun was had, and my friends commented on how great my house was for parties. I lived alone in a 3-bedroom house with an attached garage, so people who wanted to stay over could stay in one of the bedrooms, and the people who wanted to smoke had easy access to the garage. We sometimes moved my car out of the garage and into the driveway to play some beer pong. My friends really pushed the idea of me having more parties. I loved meeting new people, so we started partying at my house every weekend. It wasn't difficult to get people to come to our parties. It was August, and there were 3 colleges around our town. More than once, my house would be full of people I didn't know. I woke up a lot to find random strangers in my house, but one of my friends always took responsibility for inviting each stranger over. It wasn't a big deal to me at the time. I would just clean up the house, go to work during the week, and have another party on the weekend.
These parties weren't crazy or anything. There weren't any drugs involved, just alcohol, which I thought was totally safe. One day in September, when I was leaving for work, I went to shut the garage door when I noticed that my door remote wasn't on the car's sun visor where I usually kept it. I thought maybe it had fallen off. So I got out and searched under the seats. I was more annoyed than scared, because I thought I had maybe taken it out while I was drunk or something. I shut the garage by punching in the code on the wall panel and went through the house to get back to my car and headed for work. That night at work, I clocked out for lunch, and as soon as I entered the parking lot, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed unknown number. I thought it was one of my friends calling me as a prank, because that's something that we did a lot. I answered, expecting somebody to ask me something stupid in a weird accent. But there was nothing. Complete silence. I thought it was weird, so I just hung up, and I didn't want to waste my break dealing with stupid prank phone calls. Everything continued on as normal. We closed the store, and I was walking back to my car when I got another call. It was from an unknown number again. There was that same silence when I answered. I really thought it was one of my friends because I hadn't had any missed calls. And how could this person be calling me as soon as I clocked out and knew that I had my phone on me? My friends were all familiar with my schedule, so this had to be the only explanation. I called my friend Lacey, and she said that she had no idea what I was talking about. I didn't believe her at first, but then her boyfriend verified that she had been with him, and they certainly did not call me. I wasn't sure what to think. I brushed it off and forgot about it as soon as I got home. I had the next couple of days off, and usually on my days off I slept in pretty late. I woke up around 11 the next day and got out of bed. I grabbed my phone and went into the living room when it began ringing. You guessed it. It was from an unknown number. There was nothing but silence when I answered. This happened a couple of times throughout the day, and I was getting pretty annoyed by then. I was also annoyed that I still couldn't find my garage door remote. I looked everywhere that day, eventually just giving up. I thought maybe it had fallen out of my car while I was out. Fast forward about 3 weeks. The calls started happening every single day. The most unsettling part of all of this, they would happen only when I was available to answer my phone. I never had any missed calls during work or when I was asleep. As soon as I would step out of my workplace, the unknown number would call me again. I really thought somebody was going to some great lengths to play a prank on me. But even stranger things began happening. I stopped parking in the garage because it was so annoying to go through the house to open or close the garage door. One day, when I left for work, I backed up and heard a loud scraping noise beneath my car. I got out, and there were these huge tree branches underneath my car. I had no idea how they got there, but it was annoying to get them out from under my vehicle. About a week later, I heard a loud bang at my front door. When I went to go check, there was a tree branch sitting on my porch, right outside my front door. This was when I called Lacey and basically told her that I had to stay at her house for a couple of nights. I was terrified. I went to Lacey's and sure enough, the unknown number called. I didn't answer that call. 5 seconds later, Lacey's phone rang. It was from unknown number. We were super freaked out. I told her not to answer it. At this point, I knew it was either a mutual friend playing this crazy, drawn-out prank on us, or we had a real stalker on our hands. I decided to tell one of my managers at work what had been happening. He immediately told me to call the police the next time I received a call. Like clockwork, my phone rang as I walked to my car during lunch break. I called the police after listening to silence for a full minute. The police basically told me that they couldn't trace the call, but they did say that they would send a police officer to watch my house for a couple of days to see if they noticed anything. Nothing but phone calls happened over the next week. I wasn't too scared anymore. I actually started to become pretty mean to the unknown caller, saying that they were a coward and asking why they were doing this. After following up with the police, they apologized that this was happening, but said that there wasn't really much that they could do. Tree branches began showing up in the middle of my front yard, and I would hear banging noises on my front windows at night. For some reason, I didn't feel safe in my room anymore, and I started sleeping on the couch. One night, I went to the kitchen to grab a glass of water when the unknown number called me again. I became so frightened that I called up Lacey, and she came over to stay with me. I didn't understand how this was happening, because I never saw anyone watching me or anything, and I never noticed anyone following me or watching me from a distance whenever I was out. Sometimes there would be napkins inside my screen door, or stacks of blank paper in my grass. I got markers in my mailbox. There would be candy wrappers on top of my car. Whoever was doing this was very strange. This continued until winter break. On Christmas Eve, I was driving out to my grandfather's farm to celebrate with my family. I received a call. I was so frustrated by now, I picked up the phone and started screaming at the person on the other end, saying that it was Christmas and they should just let me celebrate with my family in peace. I called them a freak and asked them what they wanted. Tears began rolling down my face. Things devolved to the point where I just started begging them to leave me alone. But as always, there was nothing but silence on the other end. After the celebration, I drove back to my house. That night, I was sleeping on my couch when I woke up to a light in my face. Somebody was outside, shining a flashlight through my windows. I wasn't sure what to do, so I ran and locked myself in the bathroom and called Lacey. She immediately came over. We looked around and found no one. I was so scared, but she stayed over, and that made me feel a lot safer. The calls kept coming, and the police still did nothing. Nothing happened outside of my house. There were no more branches or weird things turning up on my porch. I began sleeping in my room again because I thought maybe they had backed off. One morning I woke up when I noticed through the kitchen door window that my garage was open. I thought maybe it had gotten stuck on something, and I just hadn't noticed. I went over to the wall panel and punched in the code and watched it close. I tried to put it out of my mind and grabbed a glass of milk and went to go sit at the dining room table. And that's when I saw it. My missing garage door remote was sitting on my dining room table. Of course, I freaked out. I was still in my pajamas, but I ran to my car and drove. I didn't even know where I was going. I just called my best friend Lacey and told her it was time to move. We had been talking about moving to a different city for a while, and I told her now was the time. Lacey and her boyfriend came over to my house with me to help me check things out, but of course no one was there. We soon got an apartment in a different city, and the phone call stopped as soon as we moved. I remember it was Valentine's Day. We were having a girls' day out, so we went out and enjoyed a movie. I told her that I was going to leave my phone in the apartment, I remember plugging it in the charger in the kitchen before we left. On our way back to the car, Lacey and I were chatting about the film, and I saw something sitting beside the car on the ground. It was my phone. We both died a little inside and ended up staying at her boyfriend's house that night. There was no sign of anyone being in our apartment the next day when we got there. Unfortunately, I never found out who was behind this. No one has fessed up. I know that none of my friends would have let me live in a constant state of fear for nearly 5 months. I even asked a few random people who were at my house parties that I didn't know that well, but no one had any idea what I was talking about.
There's always a reason to be afraid.